Want to run AAA games on your potato of a PC? Check the link in the description below for more details. I believe that Terrarians often speedrun the game to Moonlord and never take their time on their worlds. I want to change that. So over the course of a year, I will be playing on this one world, with each stage of progression being blocked until the start of a new month. I'm doing this so I can seriously take my time in each stage of Terraria's progression and see what it has to offer. So for the month of August, I've only been allowed to defeat Plantera and the Golem. Otherwise, I could make no other form of progression. This is what happened. Now, when I started the month, I was feeling unsure as to whether I'd actually be able to do everything I wanted to do. I needed to finish my dungeon build, fight 2 bosses, farm in the hard mode dungeon, try an idea I had for echo painting with my wizard tower build, fight the 3rd tier of Old One's army. This was one of the rare months where I actually have more to do than I think I can do. The only other times this run has felt this way was in January when we were first getting started and when I entered hard mode. So let's just see if I can check all those items off the list for this month. Because I'm a big brain content creator, I decided to start the month with the most exciting thing I could think of, adding to my dungeon build. Oh yeah, this is top tier content. In all seriousness though, this build has been a project for several months. I don't remember when I started, I just know that I put a pin in it for the last month or two, and I need to make sure I finish this thing before I fight Plantera and unlock hard mode dungeon. After all, part of the reason for this build is to try and make a cool little effect around the dungeon as I mess around in it during hard mode. I was actually a little concerned when I started working on this because I don't know if I can actually finish the build in time. Right now I'm putting in walls and blocks, but there is still another part I need to add. That being glowing green gemspark blocks to give it a sort of radioactive science lab sort of vibe. Thing is, this build has been the largest one I've ever made and has taken longer than any build I have ever done before. And yet, this may very well be the build I'm feeling the least certain about. It's hardly even a build, really. It's just a massive mining project with a very basic structure placed on the outside. There's nothing fancy or overly creative with the whole thing. It's just a tunnel with gemspark blocks, basically. So despite all this time I've put into it, I do not know if I'll actually really like what it turns into. I just hope I prove myself wrong once it's finally done. I didn't want to spend all my time during the first week doing this though, so after getting far enough along that I was sure I could finish it before the Plantera and Golem fight, I decided to get to working on some other things. First thing I thought of was actually making a surface glowing mushroom biome so I could get the truffle. Normally, I just make a floating platform of mud, and I think a lot of other people do that as well, but I wanted to make this biome feel like an incorporated part of the world generation. So I started block swapping a lot of dirt just past the scary face I made a while back, and then I planted some of the seeds so it could start spreading as I went to the jungle. With the mechs down, it was time to get to work on mining chlorophyte. There was quite a lot to mine, which was great. I beat all of the mechs about halfway through last month, and I could have been mining this stuff earlier, but I think putting it off allowed the chlorophyte to spread a little more, which has made this grind session a lot easier, especially since I need enough chlorophyte for 3 sets of armor, not just 1. I only made 1 for the melee and ranger build though, since I've hardly been using my mage build. I also mentioned this in my medium core video, but I think shroomite armor is overrated, and although I did end up changing my armor set in that run, I don't actually think that made a real difference. So I want to stick with the chlorophyte ranger build and see how the run plays out. Now before I get to the 3rd tier Old One's army, I figured I'd fight the 2nd tier one a few more times to make sure I have enough defender medals to buy the 3rd tier rod from the tavern keep once they're unlocked. And a simple Google search was simply too much effort, so I figured I'd just guess and hope. Before I summoned the army though, I ran into a spider cave to harvest some spider fangs for the spider sentry. This way I could use the war table and have 2 extra sentries since last month I never actually beat the army and I needed a little more help. The spider queen staff combined with the auto turret on my head from the chlorophyte armor seemed to have made all the difference since now the flying enemies were no longer much of an issue and I was able to clear out the Old One's army twice, getting myself enough defender medals, I think, for the 3rd tier staff. I also got the Tome of Infinite Wisdom, which is pretty cool. I'm going to have to try to use it against the Pumpkin and Frost Moon since it excels with events. I did use it a little bit against the 2nd army I summoned since I got it in the first one I beat, but the many floating islands I put in place got in the way of the tornadoes, making the weapon less effective. But I wasn't going to move those islands, so I guess I'll just have to not use the weapon. Time to get back to work on the dungeon build. Honestly, this build has become a little bit of a drag. It's a bit monotonous, and I don't know if I really like it anymore. But I have to finish it. I've gotten this far, it's gotta be done, and there's always that little voice in the back of my head asking the question, what if I end up loving it? So I press on. Sometimes you have to do things you don't necessarily enjoy to achieve greatness. Will this build be great? Probably not, but we'll see. I got quite a ways before I ran out of Gemspark blocks and I didn't have any emeralds left. My heart sank since I didn't want to have to burn a bunch of time mining for some more emeralds. I searched for silt and found a large stash I still had on hand, so I started chucking it into the extractinator, realizing after a second that I could make the chlorophyte extractinator and make the process much faster. This thing feels kind of useless by the time you're able to get it, but now I guess I see its purpose. I didn't get a whole lot of emeralds, but I was really hoping it would be enough. After all, you can make 20 Gemspark blocks from a single gem. I went back to the dungeon, and although I was close, I still needed more. Only this time, I was out of silt. I thought about what I could do for a little bit, since I really did not need that much emerald. I went to the desert thinking I'd mine some desert fossils, but I'd already blown away so much of the stuff that I felt unsure if I could extractinate enough emeralds from what remained. Instead, I thought I'd make Gemspark blocks from the topaz I had and paint it green. Perhaps this would work, and when I painted the topaz, the shades of green matched, and I thought this was the solution. But then I noticed that the Gemspark's glow was yellow and not green. I totally forgot that the paint wouldn't change the glow effect of the block, and I could just choose to ignore the ugly yellow glow and keep building, but I really hated how it looked, and since I'd come this far, the build had to be done right. You might mention the cyan meteor build that I left not matching with slightly different shades, but I'm not fixing that. I'm not. I went back to the desert to mine out the desert fossils I gave up on earlier and found a good amount, but only ended up with 6 emeralds. At least 6 emeralds can turn into 120 Gemspark, so that should be enough. And it turns out I was much closer to the end of the build than I previously thought, and I had more than enough to finally finish the build. Let's go! Dungeon build's done! I could have run right on down into the dungeon to find out how the build looks, but we'll do that next week. First things first, we gotta fight Plantera. So I headed to the old Queen Bee arena and extended it a bit since Plantera does require a little more room, although lately I feel like I've been making my Plantera arenas wider than they need to be and a little shorter than they should be, and this carried over for this arena as well. And since we spent plenty of time hanging around after beating the mechs, it wasn't hard at all to find a bulb to initiate our first fight, which I decided to just full send, not bothering to use potions since Plantera is a pretty easy boss really, and I've been beating her without any issue in all of my runs lately. I brought her over to the arena, and during her first phase, you basically just do circles around her while making sure to avoid the spiky balls bouncing around, and yes, I'm using the dart pistols, a pre-mech weapon. That's how much I love these things. It really is that good. Once she entered second form though, I went to my flamethrower since fire is super effective against grass types, right? And yes, the flamethrower is really good against Plantera, but I guess I was a bit too cocky and was only half paying attention, resulting in my defeat. The thing that killed me was moving 3 times faster than the rest of Plantera, so I blame the game. Definitely the game's fault. Before returning to the jungle, I grabbed some potions since I can't afford to lose to this thing a second time. That would be pretty bad. With these potions, she'll be pretty easy, so I went back to the jungle to see if I could find another bulb near my arena. There was one, thankfully, so I summoned her again and drank my potions, even telling my chat, since I am doing this run live, that I was going to actually focus on the boss and not read chat mid-fight, since that would be too distracting. I got her to second form again, I was doing pretty good, and was fairly certain that this would be the one. Rid of the little gripper things. Oh man, I keep on hitting them on the way back. And oh no! Guys, I suck! Oh no! Oh no! Oh, man. And so, I'm afraid the time has come to confess to you that I suffer from a chronic disease known as skill issue. This is not a joke and no laughing matter. I've seen my doctor, and after a checkup, they told me that there's nothing they could do. There was some over-the-counter medication they called Mountain Dew, but I had a bad reaction to it. So, if you or a loved one also suffers from skill issue, be sure to be understanding and caring towards them. It is an incurable disease, and we suffer every day. Anyways, last month I mentioned that I was running low on gel and needed more gel for a flamethrower. I was starting to run low now after 2 consecutive losses to Plantera, and I had asked if there was a good way to farm gel without a statue, and the only method people mentioned was farming King Slime, which doesn't give the biggest return on investment, and I'd have to get a bunch of rubies and platinum or gold. Well, when I was hanging around my home, resting up after that skill issue flare-up I had experienced, I noticed there was actually a slime statue next to the pinwheel on my roof. How long has that been there? I never used statues either, and wow, this thing summons a lot of slimes. And they all drop gel. I assumed the drop rate would be reduced like the unicorn horns people farm from the unicorn statues. Guess I won't have to worry about running low on gel now. Time to fight Plantera again, and I am happy to report to you this time, I came out victorious. Maybe my case of skill issue has been miraculously cured. Who knows? Though sometimes, even those of us who suffer from this disease manage to get lucky. Plantera dropped the Seedler and Pygmy Staff, and I don't remember the last time I used the Seedler, so I decided to use it as my new main melee weapon, just to see how it performs. I also kept the bats instead of the tikis. Not sure which one is actually better, I'm just happy that I have the Sanguine Staff in the first place, plus they provide a little light source, which is nice for filming. I mined a bit more chlorophyte since I would need it for mage stuff later. I then took down Plantera 2 more times, and I wanted to see if I could get the axe since it's rare, and I'm not sure I've ever gotten it before actually. Pretty sure I have, but I think I sold it back then because I didn't know how rare it was. After taking down the plant the 3rd time, I got the Venus Magnum, and I feel like a lot of people in the Terraria community don't understand just how good this thing is. It's better than the Mega Shark, and this isn't even a hot take, it just is. I think it happened with a recent update, maybe even 1.4.4, so I understand why people think the Venus Magnum isn't good because it wasn't great for a while, but now it's just a straight up upgrade to the Mega Shark. It's just as fast and has higher damage output, so if you haven't been using this thing, do it. I even checked the wiki and it's wrong. Its stats have apparently not been updated since the 1.4.4 update, but just watch them change the wiki after this video goes out. Just watch that happen. I finished up the week by fishing in the desert for oysters. I wanted a pink pearl so I could get the galaxy pearl for its permabuff. I've also never gotten the galaxy pearl before. Thing is, the pink pearl is stupidly hard to get. I remember trying to get it in journey mode, and I got enough oysters so I could research and duplicate them en masse, and I went through 4 stacks of 999, so 4,000 oysters just to get 5 pink pearls. That's obscene. Plus, the permabuff isn't really that necessary at this point, so I'm not sure I'll spend all that much time on trying to get the Galaxy Pearl. But maybe if it comes to it, I will fish for it since I never have gotten the Galaxy Pearl before. Before we move on to week 3, I want to remind you that we're shooting for 100k subscribers by the end of the year, and I'll be throwing 1 stick of dynamite for every subscriber I have at year's end. So if you enjoy the content and want to help me blow up the world, consider subscribing today. The start of week 3 and I went back to the jungle to fight the Golem, but then there was a bulb along the path and I figured I'd just kill the plant really quick in the hopes of getting the axe, but I didn't get it, so off to the jungle temple we go. Sometimes I'll just glide over the ground of the temple to ignore the pressure plates and traps, but I figured I'd mine them up this time. I suppose I could have just flown over them and then disconnected the wiring once Golem was defeated, but since we've established that I have skill issue, I thought I'd deal with it ahead of time. Turns out that was a very good decision. I always hear people talk about how they have had terrible Golem arena generation in the jungle temple, but I've never really experienced it myself. I've had some arenas that seem smaller than others, but overall I don't get what people mean when they say they get terrible arenas. Well, of all the runs I've ever done, this just so happens to be the one run with the single worst Golem arena I've ever seen in my life. What even is this? One reason I don't encounter so much weird jungle temple generation is because I typically play on large worlds, so the world gen has room to work, and well, this is another large world, and I got this monstrosity. This isn't even an arena room. It just looks like the tunnel thing widened a little and then got cut off. Well, time to go for it. Golem's easy anyways, right? Well, I actually did better than I thought, all things considered. Though I did use the dart pistol a bit, and I think at this point I'm probably expanding the lifespan of this weapon too long. During the first part, I used the Phoenix bow, which was probably a better idea, but either way, I lost the first fight, but that was expected. When I got home, I did some organizing, but also remembered that the dog and cat licenses were a thing. I couldn't remember if I ever had bought these, and if I hadn't, then it's been too long since I'd failed to purchase these licenses. Turns out I did have the cat and dog, and I totally forgot to hit the little home button just to see if they were there or not, but I was still missing the bunny, so now I have a rabbit that has joined me on this world. Back at the Jungle Temple, on a whim, I thought I'd try the Seedler against the Golem. I wanted to see if it's any good at all, especially since you can get the true Excalibur at this point in progression. A short time later, and the Golem was dead before I even realized what was happening. I was mostly holding down right click to attack and was focusing so much on dodging the projectiles that I missed how fast I was melting the Golem's health away. Maybe the true Excalibur could take him down just as fast, but the Seedler has range while the Excalibur does not, allowing me to easily dodge the Golem's attacks. The Seedler is a lot better than I thought it was. I started using it against Plantera, but once she entered second form, I went back to the Flamethrower. I probably could have stuck with the Seedler, but the Flamethrower is just so good in this fight. I didn't get the axe, which is sad, but I heard the drop rate of the axe is like 2 or 5%, so I suppose that's to be expected. But now's the moment no one's been waiting for. Time to go to the hard mode dungeon and see if the build I've spent so many hours of my life on looks any good. I entered, and at first, I was kind of happy. It looks alright. The torches in the surrounding tunnels need to be removed so the green glow effect can be more prevalent. As I continue deeper into the dungeon, there's plenty of places where the exterior can't be seen, so the build was in no way prevalent, but when I could see it, I kind of enjoyed it, and if nothing else, it did create a very clear marker for where the dungeon ends. No need to wonder if there's a false wall somewhere. Was the build worth it? Nah, I wouldn't say so, but I put my mind to something and I accomplished it, so at least I can take pride in it. You may also notice I've been using the Flower Pal. Socrates released a video not long ago where he concluded that this weapon isn't worth it for where it is in progression, and I wanted to see for myself whether I thought that was the case. After all, the Drippler Crippler has been warming me up to the idea of using flails. But after some use, it's hard to say this weapon is worth it. Watching my DPS meter as well as the general feel for how well I could deal with the enemies, it would seem to me that it's about on par with the true Excalibur. The main hiccup comes with how the flail is a bit more targeted while the Excalibur hits everything with broad strokes. It was cool to try, but I didn't see myself using it in the future. Another weapon I never use is the True Knight's Edge, but I do need to get one so I can craft the Terra Blade. Defeating Plantera makes it so Mothron can spawn during the solar eclipse, and from that we can snag a broken hero's sword. I only beat Skeletron Prime once earlier, so I had to beat him once more to get enough souls for the True Knight's Edge. I could then summon the solar eclipse now, but I wanted to spend more time farming for things in the dungeon. It also occurred to me that if I wanted Master Ninja gear for each build, that I'd need 3 Tabis and black belts, and that does not sound like a fun time. But at the same time, I never really made any sort of farm or even just an open area in the dungeon before because it typically isn't that hard to get what you want. Although I must admit that the part of the dungeon with this kind of wall, whatever it's called, it always seems to me it's hard to find and takes up a rather small part of the dungeon. This world has a larger section of it than I usually find, so that's nice. It was here that I started clearing out an area in the hopes that I could get the sniper rifle and scope as well as the Spectre staff. Thing is though, the snipers kept chilling in the pool of water over there and I wouldn't see them and then they'd snipe me. Kind of funny, but I know that I'll be able to get plenty of enemies to spawn at least. Can we also just talk about the Paladin's Hammer? This weapon feels like it could be really fun to use, but it's so very weak compared to everything else. It makes me sad. Although, I wrote the script, and then a couple days later, Chippy releases a video where apparently somebody on the forums said, hey, can we buff the Paladin's Hammer? And Red's going to take a look at it. So, well, yeah, I agree. I returned to the jungle to kill Plantera again, but she didn't drop the axe, and then I went to kill Golem, but I lost pretty badly after trying to use the True Excalibur against him. If you ask me, this confirms that the Seedler is much better than the True Excalibur, at least against Golem. Or maybe I just did uniquely bad at dodging him during that one particular fight. I don't know. When I respawned, it was day, so I summoned the Solar Eclipse to farm it for a bit. I got at least one Mothron, but that's the only one that matters since it dropped the Broken Hero's Blade and Mothron Wings. Earlier, I bought Leaf Wings for every build I had, and I honestly have no idea what tier all the different wings are on, so who knows if that's a waste of 5 platinum. I assumed Mothron wings would be better, so I equipped them and I crafted the Terra Blade, which was very handy. To wrap up the week, I remembered I could buy Echo Painting, and I started getting to work on an idea I had for the Wizard Tower build. I wanted a gem spark glowing effect without placing the actual gem sparks. As I do that, I'm also super excited to officially announce the launch of my second channel, Thorben Gaming, where we'll talk about all kinds of different games, whether it's old, new, indie, AAA, famous, or obscure. I even launched the first 2 videos alongside this one, so consider checking those out as well, and subscribe if you enjoy them. I am also live streaming many of those experiences over on Kick, and will also be streaming Terraria community events and collaborations over there. But One Year One World and other solo runs will still be live streamed on this channel here. If you're wondering why Kick instead of Twitch, it is also in the description. Now, let me know what you think of this glowing effect. I think it kind of works, but it definitely made the crystals look weird, so I'm going to have to fix that some other time. I leap into week 4 with a quick Plantera fight since I still want to get that lovely axe, and you didn't see that. Time to go to the jungle for the first time this week. Let's head to the jungle temple since I didn't see a single bulb along the way. I do need some beetle husks so I can get the full beetle armor still. So let's take down the golem real quick and, oh. I realized that I only had 1 turtle shell, which is weird to me. How have I only gotten 1 turtle shell after all this time? Oh look, the first Plantera bulb of the week! I casually took down Plantera, totally not doing worse than several of my previous fights, and lo and behold, we got the axe. That's absolutely awesome. I knew this would be an axe, but I didn't expect it to also be a hammer, but I guess at this point in progression, just about all hammers and axes are combined into one tool. Though I actually thought this was supposed to be a real weapon, and I guess it does pretty good damage, but it seems to me this isn't meant to be used in combat. Time to go to the jungle temple for the first time this week, and well, I thought I'd just go home. You know, there was a death in the family, and I simply didn't have the heart for it anymore, so I decided to return home and take care of my affairs rather than fight the jumping mass of sentient hardened clay. I stopped by the dungeon to grab a water candle because I forgot I had a few in my piggy bank, but oh well, now we have another one. There are several things that I need to farm for this week. I want the Blessed Apple, Turtle Shells, Magma Stone so I can craft the Fire Gauntlet. I also want to fight the Old One's army sometime this week. First thing on the list, I suppose, was the Blessed Apple, but nothing was spawning even after putting down a water candle, so I went on a side quest that turned out to be much longer than I thought it would be. There's this candle called the Shadow Candle, and what it does is it turns off the peaceful effect from villages or NPCs or whatever that's called. I have never once made this thing, and apparently a bunch of YouTubers made videos on it like 9 or 10 months ago, and I never noticed. I thought at first the candle was crafted from other candles, but then I figured out I needed demonite. The recipe is pretty easy, barely an inconvenience, but all my tombstones seem to have magically disappeared, and I have no idea where I put them or if I accidentally trashed them. And I have not been saving any of my other tombstones during this run, so now I have to go around my world collecting tombstones. Strangely, there were several tombstones in the Golem and Plantera arenas. Wonder how those got there. I also casually got the Uzi without even noticing it, and it's worse than the Venus Magnum. But I finally got the Shadow Candle, which I might not have really needed in the first place. I got it since the wizard housing isn't too far away from where I was farming for the Blessed Apples, but I'm not even sure it was close enough to have an effect. Oh well, first time making this candle, so that was fun. After maybe 5 unicorns, I got a blessed apple. When I went home to organize, a blood moon spawned and I used the moon dial to fast forward through that, and a solar eclipse occurred during the day it also skipped, so that was the single best time I could have used that thing. Next up is the magma stone, which took maybe a minute to farm. I'm getting stupidly lucky drops right now, but that'd come to an end right now as I farm for turtle shells, and it wasn't even the drop rate that was that bad. I couldn't get any turtles to spawn. I even had a battle potion, water candle, and blood moon all at once and barely got any turtles. Eventually, I did get the shells, but instead of making the armor, I rushed to the dungeon to try and benefit from the extra spawn rates to farm for a few things. I didn't get very much, but I did pick up a black belt, which allowed me to craft my first piece of Master Ninja gear. Before I killed Golem again for the beetle husk, it occurred to me I had a lot of NPCs, but the princess hadn't moved in. I didn't have the truffle, so I needed him, but before I checked the glowing mushroom, I wanted to get the 8th and final town slime, the copper one with a sword. I have never gotten this one before, and I never even bothered to look it up. My chat was saying I had to throw a copper short sword at a green slime, so naturally I grabbed a copper short sword and threw it at the green slime. Strange. It didn't work. Chat must be wrong. Over at the glowing mushroom biome, things are looking really nice. Big fan of how this has turned out. It could probably benefit from an extension, but for now I'll just make a quick house and the truffle moved in immediately. Very nice. Oh, and I learned that by green slime, my chat meant, you know, an actual green slime, but also it doesn't have to be a green slime. It just has to be a slime. Like, literally any slime. Just throw a sword at it and boom, you got the copper short sword. How have I never gotten this thing before? I had the truffle though, so I could get the princess. I just needed some available housing. And I haven't made an ocean pylon yet. For the longest time, I've wanted to make an ocean temple, and I'm definitely going to have to get to that at some point, but first I'm making some beach houses on the surface. I'll have to get to the rest of the build at some other time. I wanted to use some of the coral furniture, but I have no idea how to make it, and I figured the shell piles or shells from the beach would be the material needed to craft it, but none of them gave me the recipe I was looking for. How do you craft the coral building materials? How do you do this? I used palm wood to make a very simple build that I'll have to improve at a later point, but I got the princess, which was the main point. I'll just have to kill her later for the weapon she can draw. I wanted to finish the week with the Old One's army, but I first wanted to craft the beetle armor, and to do that I have to beat Golem again. But I lost. Again. The next time I actually used potions and put in some effort and barely won. I'm actually very confused. The first time I beat Golem, I hardly even noticed. He was just dead in no time at all. I am genuinely confused as to how I'm doing so bad. Since I still had potions, I summoned him again in the hopes of getting the pick saw, but then I lost early in the second form. My mind is shattering. Am I really this bad? I blame the arena. That's it. It's the arena's fault. At last, I fought the Old One's army, and the third tier absolutely wrecked me. I was barely able to clear the first wave, and the second one took me out. This seems to me a bit overpowered, but I guess we haven't made any real progress ever since we got to the third tier. I know there are methods for cheesing this thing, but I want to do everything I can to avoid using those strategies while also beating this thing before Moonlord. The final week of the month, and I just realized I have no pumpkins. Next month, we won't actually be unlocking any bosses per se, but we will be unlocking the Frost and Pumpkin Moon events. But of course, in order to craft the Pumpkin Medallion, I'm going to need some pumpkins, and they don't spawn naturally until October. But we do have the handy little dryad who sells pumpkin seeds for us, so I planted some of those and got to work on one of my building projects. Last month, I made a massive arena spanning the ocean all the way to the jungle. I built a few towers, but I still needed to copy those towers over to the rest of the arena. Right now, they're a bit far to the left, and I don't often spend a lot of time over there. I should also add some stuff to this build to make it a bit brighter. Not sure what to add, but some illuminant paint on the platforms might be alright, I don't know. But for now, I want to create these towers and just get the base of the build finished. As I built though, a Martian probe spawned and I had to kill it before it spawned the Martian Madness. If you've been paying attention to the locked boss scroll thing at the start of each video, then you know the Martian Madness is locked behind the same month as Duke Fishron, and that's October. But of course, probes are going to spawn no matter what I want, and they would continue to spawn as I added to this build. And of course, this is one of those instances where you get a bunch of the thing you don't want when you don't want it, but whenever I actually want to get a probe and do all the recommended optimizations, I never get these probes to spawn. That aside, these probes are actually the one thing that might be fought early during this challenge. I'll be attempting to kill off the probes, but this is one of the events that is actually locked behind progression that is also capable of spawning in the months prior to it being unlocked. This was an oversight on my part when I started this run, so I'll be trying to kill off the probes, but if it happens that they spawn, then they'll just have to be moved up. After building a few towers, I went to the dungeon to farm for a few things. I still needed the sniper rifle and scope, and wanted the specter staff as well. In the meantime, I could also use some more black belts and tabis for master ninja gear for my other builds. The specter staff was the first one I got my hands on, and I used it just for the heck of it and was really surprised of how well it did. The weapon is one I've always viewed as a cool homing weapon, but nothing more. I never thought of it as actually viable, but something you just use every here and there for the sake of having something homing. But I was actually surprised by how it performed. Not long after, I got a sniper rifle, and in the meantime, I picked up a scope and a tabi. The last thing I wanted was an inferno fork, and I searched the entire dungeon, but didn't get a single area in it where the inferno mage guys would spawn. I have run into the red fiery skeleton guys every once in a while, and I'm pretty sure they spawn in the same place, but maybe they can also spawn elsewhere? I'm only vaguely familiar with how it all actually works. Maybe there's a section that I missed, but assuming I did, the area with that wall must be very small. Suffice to say, I didn't get an inferno fork. I did get 4 tabis and 1 more black belt, which should have meant I could craft another master ninja gear, but as it would turn out, I don't have any more tiger climbing gear. I have some shoe spikes, but not climbing claws. Well, guess I won't be getting any master ninja gear now. Before I return to making more towers at the arena, I wanted to first try and kill the Golem again. I have to redeem myself after so many terrible failures, and I wanted a pick saw. Thankfully, I took him down on the first try and was also gifted the pick saw. Neat. But this does not satisfy me. Now that I had the pick saw, I could smell blood in the water. I mined out the terrible jungle temple arena I was given, widening it to be more similar to a normal arena, and now that it was done, I was able to take down the Golem much more easily than ever before, once and for all proving that it was the arena's fault for my defeats. I wrapped up the month by adding a few more towers and toppling the monarchy. There actually isn't a whole lot to say this month. It was just a good time. I always felt like there was something to do, and I was able to happily work on several building projects. It was pretty good, and I'm curious what next month is going to be like, since we'll have 2 events to fight, but no new bosses. Perhaps I'll have to put in some real effort to get those biome keys, since I haven't found a single one this whole time. But here's to another month in what may very well be my favorite run of all time.